Hello there once again. This is Vincent Rogers, and I am walking into the shot to show you once again the miracle of modern electronics, and also, you know, to try to produce the kind of effects that they did in the big studios in the olden days, my days at Metro. Anyway, here is Vatican II. I imagine many of you have been so intrigued by Vatican I that you didn't even wait, that right away you jumped on Vatican II. Well, I hope you did, because everything will be fresh in your memory, and we will recall a few things. But I first of all want to do something and bring a little time frame into this. I told you about the crooked machinations of the Vatican Bank, the Institute for Religious Works, closely associated, so much so with the Mafia, you could hardly tell where one began and the other left off. And so now, as I step aside magically once again, I'm going to refer to some dates here. 1963 was the year that Paul VI became the Pope. 1978, he died. And this gentleman here that you see, he became John Paul I. Now, you know, many of you, I'm sure, know of John Paul II, and you're wondering, where in the hell was John Paul I? Was he a medieval character or something like that? Oh, no, no, no. In 1978, he was Pope for 33 days and died under very, very mysterious circumstances. 1978. 33 days. The new Pope is John Paul II. And here he is with this thug, this banker, Paul Marcinkus. Wouldn't you assume that the new Pope would have got rid of that guy mighty quick? He never did. In 1982 was the year when the Ambrosio Bank blew up, and here's Roberta Calvi, found hanging from this Blackfriars Bridge in London. The Mafia really takes care of its own, I'll tell you. Really takes care of them. So with that, let's take up from there. Calvi, as I say, is a suicide. Ha ha. And all over Italy, there are literally, I mean it, dozens of people being shot and killed who had some knowledge of this bank. It was just simply a bloodbath. So you wonder what happened to Paul Marcinkus. Well, now here's an interesting thing. You assume a guy like that's living in the Vatican. Well, you're wrong. These princelings, they don't live there. That's all crowd. The clerks and stuff, that's what people... No, they all have private residences paid by the church and your money. Marcinkus lived off campus. He was served by nuns, served by priests, everything taken care of. Because of Vatican II and Pope John Paul XXIII, it was no longer necessary for a priest to wear the clerical garb all the time. Well, hell, Marcinkus never did. He was around in sport coats all the time. Hail fellow, well met. Drank his bourbon whiskey straight, chewed on cigars. Favorite pastime was playing golf, hanging out at all the watering holes. A rather unsavory character, really. When this bank blew up, Marcinkus, who lived off campus, scurried right away over into the Vatican. Why? Because he was beyond the reach of Italian law. And for years on end, he stayed in the Vatican because he was, in effect, avoiding a prosecution. Ultimately, the Vatican made a settlement in the Ambrosianum matter. They first of all said they had only a very small interest in it. They said we only had 1%. It's a lie. They found out at least that they owned 15%, and they think they owned a lot more. What they finally did was to cough up, I think it was something on the order of $250 million to the stockholders and the owners of the bank in restitution for all of the depredations that had been made. As I say, you would have thought John Paul II would have gotten rid of this guy, but he didn't, and he stayed on until the last few years. He finally came, the Italian government gave up on trying to prosecute him. He came back to the United States, retired in Arizona, playing his golf, drinking his bourbon, and chewing on his cigars. No legal process was ever brought against him, in effect. So anyway, there you are. Now, what's interesting here is this. I talked about the mystery of John Paul I. John Paul I. Let's take a picture of him. Here he is. He was the cardinal in Venice. And every picture you'll ever see of the guy, he was always smiling and happy. None of the ghastly solemnity and the pomposity of this present Pope in all his gorgeous raiment and drag that he goes about, you know, floating like like Oberon from Midsummer Night's Dream or something like that, you know. Not this one, very plain. As I say, 33 days and he's dead. At the time of his papacy, it was assumed that he was going to clean house in many matters affecting the Vatican, and especially the Vatican Bank. There are a lot of people that would have liked to seen him dead. Well, maybe it was just a coincidence that he died at age, after only 33 days of papacy, but the death was very mysterious. Here's what happened, in fact. He had a light dinner, went to bed at 10 o'clock at night, which was his custom, and the following morning, at 4:30 in the morning, Sister Vincenza comes with a tray, and it has coffee and a piece of toast. Now you say, wait a minute, how are you kidding me? A nun in the palace there, in the papal thing? No, can't be. Oh yes. You see, somebody has to do the dirty work, empty the piss pots, change the dirty linen and stuff like. You want priests doing that kind of work? Get the nuns to do it. They're women, they're worthless. Get them to do it. Yes, there are nuns who do that work. Sister Vincenza knocks on the door. Holy Father, it's time, and she doesn't hear any reply from him. He ordinarily would come to the door and get the tray. But she doesn't think, well, he's sleeping a little over, and so she goes back to the dormitory where the nuns are. Oh yes, there's more nuns over there. Once again, you need them to do the dirty work. Waits a while and returns. The tray is still in the front. Now she's concerned, and she knocks on the door. Holy Father, Holy Father. Reply comes there, none. And she's kind of perplexed. Should I go in? But then she says, well, maybe I better. And she opens the door, goes in, and the sight that greets her is simply appalling. He's sitting straight up in bed. He's clutching papers. His face is contorted in just the most awful agony of death that anyone can possibly imagine. There's a bottle, a medicine bottle on the stand, and she bolts him. She knows he's dead. She knows that immediately. And so she goes out into back to the nuns, and they decide, well, let's get a hold of his assistant, Father McGee, who happened to be an American, as it happened. Father McGee goes in, and he realizes immediately the Pope is dead, and this awful sight. So now they get yet another priest who was an assistant to John Paul the First, and this was a Father Lorenzi. Lorenzi now goes up and touches him, and he's ice cold, and so now they do the thing that they must do, which is get a hold of the Vatican Secretary of State, a Cardinal Vio, a Frenchman. He comes in the room, takes one look at the situation, and he swears them to silence. When that happens, folks, that means that the lies are going to fly. This is when the church goes into a mode of absolute panic. They will do anything to avoid a scandal, anything in the world. Swear you to silence. The papers that the Pope were clutching are missing. The slippers that he wore are missing. The bottle on the side of the table is missing. The set has been changed, completely changed. At this point, you would think that it'd be calling other cardinals and one thing and another, to make arrangements for the. So, no, they phoned the embalmer. And of course, in the meantime, the house physician has come in, and he takes one look at the Pope and says, well, he had a myocardial infarct. Well, you can't make a diagnosis like that. We don't even go up to the corpse, for crying out loud. He was embalmed, I think, with something like 12 hours of his death. No bodily fluids were taken for autopsy sample. There would be no autopsy. It was done in terrible haste. And now here's how if you're going to tell a lie, make it simple. Just make it simple. Most of the time you'll get away with it. I recommend that to all my patients. I'm often consulted in matters like this. I say, well, I like a trooper, but keep it short. Oh, no, they wanted to put a spiritual gloss on it. You see, the Pope died, and here he was, in his hand was a book, The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis, which was his favorite reading. This was his own private book that he had with him always. Well, reporters, somebody knew that this was not true because he did read Thomas à Kempis, but not all that much, and his copy was still in Milan. So now the whole thing exploded, and now they had to admit that it was not Father Lorenzi, whom they now said had discovered the course. No, they had to admit indeed that it was Sister Vincenza. So the lie just blew up right in their face. And of course, when that happened, then people began to say, wait a minute, if the church is going to do this kind of stuff, is it possible that the whole thing was murder and it's a cover-up? Well, so to make matters kind of interesting, there are a number of people that would have liked to have seen the Pope dead. Paul Marcinkus, Archbishop now, he would certainly have been one, because I think if indeed this new Pope was going to expose the bank, it would have been awful for Marcinkus. There's no question about it. He could have wished him dead. Cardinal Vio, the Cardinal Secretary of State, might have wanted him dead because Vio was secretly a member of the Masonic Order, which requires instant excommunication by the Church. He might have wanted it. But for your delectation, I give you Cardinal Cody of Chicago. He sure as hell wanted him dead. Now, that brings up Cardinal Cody. I love telling this story because, of course, the papers don't like to do it. They have the information, of course, but they didn't want to do it contemporaneously, and they're not even going to do it historically, so I'll do it here for you. He was the head, this is now, what, 1978. This is 1978. He's the head of the Chicago Archdiocese, the then largest archdiocese in the United States. Largest now, of course, is Los Angeles because of all the Latinos. But then it was Chicago. They had 2.5 million parishioners. That's a lot. The annual income, as far as we know, because they never kept any books to amount to anything, was $300 million a year, maybe more, maybe less. 450 parishes and 2,300 priests. This guy had an empire. No accounting for the money. No accounting for the money. He fancied himself a genius in money matters. Give you an idea of what kind of genius he was. He made a $3 million investment in the Penn Central Railroad, and 6 days later the railroad went bankrupt. That's how brilliant he was in financial matters. But what difference does that make? Plenty where that came from. The little old ladies who opened up their purse and put money in the plate. The federal government began to take an interest. Local people of Chicago, I mean, as far as the locals are concerned, if it isn't Al Capone, then it's the church. I mean, they did just another day in the life of Chicagoans. But the feds were interested because of the financial status of a non-profit thing where the money is missing. And finally, when they called for the books and took one look at preliminary books, which they realized were just a total lie, they subpoenaed the cardinal himself. And an army of lawyers surrounded him, to prevent him having to go before a grand jury. Fortunately, He did the one thing he could have done for Catholicism, the greatest thing he could do. He died. There, problem solved. But in the meantime, there was an awful scandal floating about, as a matter of fact. And I'm going to ask once again for Ski to take a picture here. It's not a very good one, but it'll do the job. Here, the bloated presence of this gentleman, that is Cardinal Cody. Here is Pope Paul VI. Obviously, it had taken some time before his death in 1978. But right behind Paul is this woman. She was Cardinal Cody's mistress. Look at it, bold as brass. Ordinarily, women, in the presence of the Pope are heavily veiled, or, kerchiefs over their heads. Oh, she's not her. Look how close she is to the Pope. She's right behind him. Absolutely. I mean, obviously, the Pope was set up for this shot. I mean, the man was so foolish. He should have realized what was going on, but what can you do? As I say, he really was not a bright bulb when all was said and done. Anyway, let me tell you a little something about this relationship here. It's the kind of thing that the church doesn't like to get into this too much. It became a common knowledge in Chicago that the cardinal had a mistress, and she was heavily furred, jewels. She was given property in Florida, vacation property. She had income property around Chicago. Lived like a queen. Her son was a David. Did I mention her name? That would have been helpful, wouldn't it? Her name was Helen Dolan Wilson. She had a son, David Wilson. David Wilson was an insurance broker. He had the commissions for the entire Archdiocese of Chicago. Can you even begin to imagine what the commissions on that were? No competition, just give it to this. Mrs. Wilson was presumably doing work as a secretary for the Archdiocese, but nobody knew her. Nobody knew what secretarial work she was doing. In actual fact, she was doing a little decorating of the chancellery where the Pope, where Cardinal Cody had residence. She was tidying the place up. She did all that kind of thing. And this is the kind of man that, as I say, the Vatican wanted this guy out. And they told Paul VI that you're going to have to do something. And Paul dithered, and he dithered, and he dithered, and he dithered. Oh, my God, what are we going to do here? I mean, I'll tell you what, let's send another cardinal, and they can have two of them run the thing. Well, Cody got wind of that, and he just literally said, screw you, well, I won't agree to it. And in grim defiance, grim defiance of the Pope. Now, when I've been talking about these things, they sound kind of nutsy, but here's a word of advice I give you. If you think, many of you are going to try to check this out. What you'll do is you'll go to Wikipedia. Well, that's fine. Go to Wikipedia. And if you look up Pope Paul VI, you aren't going to find much of this stuff. Or the John Paul I or John Paul II. You won't find much of this stuff. But there's a key. Instead, look up Roberto Calvi, C-A-L-V-I. Look up Miguel Sindona, S-I-N-D-O-N-A. And all of a sudden, that will be the gateway, and you'll get all this stuff about the Vatican Bank. And please also, Mario Cal. I'll spell that out for you. Mario, M-A-R-I-O, that's easy. And the last name is Cal, C-A-L. Follow that on a daily basis on your Google. Look on a daily basis and see what's out there right now and check it from time to time. This is probably going to be a very, very big story. Come back again, won't you? I'll have some other sweet things to say. Maybe I ought to hit a couple of rabbis here in the way. Oh, say, incidentally, while I still have you and I'm still on camera, sometimes pictures are worth 1,000 words. So I'm going to show you this shot, and I'm not going to say a damn thing about it. Goodbye for now.